Okay, Alexander, we have an update on Syria and Idlib and between Russia and Turkey, I guess. What's going on?
Yeah, it's very strange because this, which once, a year ago, we were all talking about the situation in Idlib province, and there was all sorts of talk about, wars and would there be a tremendous military confrontation between Syria and Turkey and Russia in Idlib province. What has happened, and it's gone almost completely unnoticed, is that the whole Idlib situation seems to be resolving itself at extraordinary speed. Now, there has been a steady advance of the Syrian military right across Idlib, and they have been quietly encircling Turkish military posts. About 2 years ago, Erdogan deployed his army into northern Syria, into Idlib province and parts of Aleppo province, and established military bases or reconnaissance posts, as they're called, across these two provinces, these two Syrian provinces. Supposedly, this was in order to monitor a ceasefire deal that had been negotiated with the Russians. And in fact, what those posts were really for, those reconnaissance posts or bases, they were to provide a sort of shield for the jihadi fighters who were based in Idlib province. Well, what has been happening is that more and more of these posts have been encircled by the Syrian military, and very quietly and without much fanfare, Erdogan has been pulling them back. So there's been a significant withdrawal of Turkish troops in Idlib. And there's been an almost complete withdrawal, as I understand it, of Turkish troops from parts of Aleppo that they had previously, Greater Aleppo, the province of Aleppo, not the city, that they had been occupying. And the Syrian army has advanced into all of these places. Simultaneously with that, there's been increasing Russian air offensive. And there were reports about a week ago of a Russian airstrike on a training center where jihadi fighters were being trained, apparently with Turkish instructors. And apparently this airstrike resulted in hundreds of these fighters and perhaps some of those Turkish instructors being killed. And Erdogan has basically said nothing about it. In fact, neither the Russians nor the Turks have been saying very much about this whole situation. But it is increasingly looking as if Idlib, this jihadi, this safe haven, as it was called in Idlib, is now being reduced. It's apparently been reduced to about a quarter of its original size. And it's basically now a strip along the border with Turkey. And also Idlib city, the capital. That's apparently all that's left. And Syria is going through a major economic crisis at the moment, connected with US sanctions and the implosion of the Lebanese economy, and the collapse of the Lebanese banks, where most Syrians kept their money. They didn't trust their own banks. But this has created a major economic crisis in Syria. But that economic crisis has been even greater in Idlib. And also the pandemic has taken a very great hold there. So it seems the whole situation in Idlib is disintegrating very, very fast. It's strange, but that whole situation seems to be resolving itself in a rather in a way that is simply not attracting the attention that we were all expecting that it would.
Yeah. So how come Russia and the Syrian forces just don't go in there and mop everything up and finally be done with this? Because it's been 4 or 5 years that we've been talking about Idlib, and it's pretty much a disgrace that we haven't seen this. We haven't seen this issue resolved, considering that the rest of Syria is pretty much has been made whole. But how come they don't do that? Number one, and number two, maybe it's been it's about to be liberated, or there's not that much resistance because Erdogan has moved all the jihadists to Azerbaijan.
Well, this is exactly the point. Why has there not been this major clear out of jihadi fighters in Idlib? Why is the Syrian army and the Russian army just moved in and, you know, cleared out Idlib city and all the rest? Why have they not done that? Well, the answer is the same answer that we've seen in the Caucasus, that we've seen in Libya, that we've seen in all sorts of places. Putin has provided Erdogan again with an off-ramp. He's given him this opportunity to pull out from Idlib and northern Syria, but to do it in a quiet way without much fanfare and pull out all those fighters. And what has Erdogan done? He's taken the fighters out of Idlib and he's transferred them to the Caucasus and to Libya and to all sorts of other places where, of course, they go ahead and attack the Russians, or at least Russian allies. So it's a game of cat and mouse that Putin and Erdogan play with each other all the time. Very frustrating for lots of people. I mean, Syrians must feel very angry about this because, and I know for a fact that Assad has been having problems in Damascus, calming tempers in Damascus with many of the important people within the Syrian government who are, bridling at the fact that there hasn't been a much more decisive attack on in Idlib, and angry with the Russians for holding things back. And in fact, Assad actually had a very, very long video conference with Putin just a few days ago, and I'm sure he will have informed Putin of all of this. But again, it's this policy that Putin has, which he seems to be determined to test to destruction, of trying to work with Erdogan. So on the one hand, yes, you can see there's a kind of logic in it because the Turks are pulling out of Idlib and seem to be doing it steadily and systematically, and it's clearly about to fall. But on the other hand, it allows Erdogan to live and fight another day somewhere else and cause more trouble elsewhere.
Yeah, but with Idlib, when Idlib falls, does that mean that there's no more Turkish presence in Syria at all, or are they still holding on to some land in and around that area?
They're still dug in a place called the GLOBALIST corridor, which is an area of Aleppo province, which they've occupied. Now, interestingly, a Russian warship fired missiles into this area just a few days ago. This is a Russian warship fired long-range cruise missiles there. But the Turks are still there, and it seems those missiles didn't hit any Turkish troops. But it's they're still there, and they're also still in another area of Syria called Afrin, which was formerly Kurdish, and where basically the Turkish army and its jihadi fighters moved in, and the Kurds were driven out. And they're also the Turks are also present in some form in eastern Syria, where again in Kurdish areas. So they would still be there. But the main area for the jihadi fighters is Idlib. And one of the reasons why the Turks occupy the GLOBALIST corridor, which is in Aleppo province, is that it's the easiest route to send supplies from Turkey directly into Idlib province. Idlib is very mountainous and the roads are bad. So though it has a common border with Turkey, it's not an easy transit area to send heavy equipment through. So they captured this place called GLOBALIST in 2018, and they've been sending their military supplies to the jihadis through the GLOBALIST corridor. If the jihadis and the Turks pull out of Idlib and Idlib falls, then there is no point in holding on to this area of GLOBALIST anymore. And I'm sure that will fall under Syrian control. But the other problems that Syria has further east with the Turks and the Kurds, and where the US military is, those remain and are unresolved.
So is the plan is the other areas where Turkey is located, is that once again an issue with Turkey and Russia agreeing to keep Turkish troops there? Is that Turkey and the US working to keep the Turkish troops there? And is Putin's dealings with Erdogan, is it to establish a permanent Turkish occupation in Afrin, for example? Is that one of the plans? And has Putin also somehow agreed to have the Turks also move into the Caucasus as well via Azerbaijan with the jihadists as well? I mean, it seems to me that Putin seems to be ceding territory and control to Erdogan, not only in Syria, but also in the Caucasus. And that makes absolutely zero sense.
No,
why would he allow such a thing? Because from what I understand, he is allowing Turkey to obtain a foothold in Azerbaijan as well. And obviously those jihadists, they've gone somewhere. They've either gone into Europe, they've either gone back to Turkey, into Europe, into Libya, and we definitely know they went to Azerbaijan. That we know. I mean, it drives me crazy. I'll finish on this point. It drives me absolutely crazy to actually think that the Russians didn't know ahead of time that Turkey was planning an attack on Armenia, moving all these jihadists to Azerbaijan. I mean, we knew about it before they even started the conflict. I mean, there were reports everywhere that Turkey was moving jihadists from Syria and Libya into Azerbaijan. So Russia must have known weeks in advance as to what was going to happen. So I'm trying to figure out all these moves taking place, and a lot of them really don't make much sense. Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I think a lot of people finding all this very difficult to understand. What I think the Russians are doing is that in Syria, they calculated that they needed to in some way defuse the Turks who had been supporting the jihadi fighters, because if the Turks went all in and supported the jihadis, it would be much more difficult to defeat the jihadis in Syria. So they leveraged their influence with the Turks to help them fight the jihadis there. And I think up to a certain point, it's paid off. So we saw all these battles in all these places when, Aleppo, back in 2016, 17, when that eventually was, brought under Syrian government control. That happened to some extent with the compliance of the Turks. And in return for getting that degree of compliance, Putin did allow the Turks to establish footholds in Syria. I think the calculus has changed, and I think the Russians are gradually pushing the Turks out of Syria. But instead of doing it in a single way, coming in, as they could do with their army, telling Erdogan, you can't keep your troops any longer there. They must go. You yourself accept that Syria must remain united. And it is, in fact, in Turkey's interests that it remain united, because if Syria breaks up, you will have Kurdish enclaves. It will be a threat to Turkey if that happens. So that's instead of saying that, what they have done again, or at least what Putin has done, is he's given Erdogan time. He's allowed Erdogan, as Putin would say, to save face. He's given Erdogan, if you like, an off-ramp. And of course, what happens when you do that with Erdogan is that, of course, he switches his troops elsewhere. So he is pulling out of Syria and advancing in the Caucasus. Now, I think what has happened is, as we discussed in our recent program, the Russians have used this, this conflict in the Caucasus to establish their troops across the southern Caucasus in ways that hadn't been the case before. They've now got troops in Nagorno-Karabakh. They've now controlled the various corridors between Azerbaijan and the other enclaves, the Azeri enclave, which is surrounded by Armenian territory, and they've got all that. They've also apparently established some kind of a monitoring center in Azerbaijan itself, where there's going to be Russian troops. So they pushed into Azerbaijan, which is a long-standing objective of theirs. But the price has been that the Turks now have a presence also. So in a sense, they've achieved something and they've created problems for themselves. Whereas and this is my own view again, if they just come along and said, you know, this fighting ends, we're not going to allow it to continue any further, we're going to sort it out, there wouldn't be any troops in the Southern Caucasus at all. But always there is this problem that, as I said, Putin never goes all in with Erdogan. Now, why this is the case, whether it's because, as I said, he's invested so much time with Erdogan that he doesn't want to give up on all that time and energy that he spent with Erdogan, which is possible, or whether it's because there are economic links with, you know, lots of Russians now having invested in Turkey, lots of Turkish money or large Turkish businesses operating in Russia, people, in other words, lobbying to keep the situation with Turkey going, whether it's because of some of Russia's allies in the Central Asia, which have good connections with Turkey, lobbying on Erdogan's behalf in Moscow, or whether it's a combination of all these factors. I don't know. But what I will say is this: by playing these long games, the Russians are storing up trouble for themselves. I mean, bear in mind, Erdogan may not be there for very long, but, you know, once he's gone, those Turkish troops in places like the Caucasus will be commanded by someone else who may be less friendly to Russia, if you could call Erdogan friendly to Russia, or less willing to work with the Russians than Erdogan is.
Yeah, we've also said that we don't know how long Putin's going to stay,
Well,
so we don't know what that
that's right.
dynamic's going to become either. What about the U.S. troops in Syria? And what about the Kurds?
Yeah, well,
What's their position then?
the U.S. troops, this is where I think the election in the U.S. is critically important. I mean, Biden's advisors. I'm going to guess, by the way, that this advisor who spoke to all the Syrian rebels and said that the U.S. military will remain there. You know, you discussed that in that article you read in antiwar.com. There's an article in antiwar.com which said that one of Biden's advisors had assured the Syrian rebels that the U.S. military would remain in eastern Syria. I personally think that advisor was probably Susan Rice. It makes sense that it was Susan Rice. That's, you know, it's more than a guess. Let me just say that. So they will remain there if Biden becomes president. And in fact, it's highly likely they will be reinforced. If Trump becomes president, and of course it's all very disputed, I think they will be pulled out. I think that's the difference. If they remain there, then there may be problems between the US and Turkey, because the US and Turkey, the US will be perceived in Turkey as backing the Kurds, because it's the Kurds that the US is allied with in eastern Syria. But of course, then we come back to the question of how firm Erdogan's position in Turkey is. So, you know, there are all these uncertainties that we don't know. If Trump, as I said, becomes president, I think that the US troops will pull out. I think the Syrian army will move in. I think that will be the effective end of the Syrian war. And I think we will see the Turkish troops in time withdraw from Syria also. Alternatively, if Biden becomes president, those troops will stay. They will be reinforced. Sanctions on Syria will be ramped up even further. And we will see an attempt to renew the war. So that's what that's all about.
Yeah, well, we'll end it there, Alexander. My small little caveat to what you just said is that if Biden manages to get into the Oval Office, not only will those troops be reinforced, but there is also the possibility that they will turn to Turkey to ramp up that war, to renew that war. And Erdogan might say, yeah, let's go for it a second time.
Absolutely. But I would also add that
go part 2 or 3 or wherever they're at this point. Yeah.
Precisely. Though I think it is more likely myself that what you will see is they will not go for an all-out conflict, because they don't want to take on the Russian military in Syria, which is very well organized and, you know, has the protection of the Russian military, which is it should be said, has now moved a step closer to Syria, because these Russian deployments in the Caucasus have brought the Russian army further south in a sense. But what I think they will do is they will crank up the pressure on Syria, and then they will try to do what they were doing in 2015, 2016, which is try to persuade the Russians to push Assad to resign. That I think is still very much the game plan. If you remember, back in 2016, we had all those negotiations between John Kerry and Sergei Lavrov, all about, you know, the US telling Russia to tell Assad to go and the Russians refusing to agree. There is rumors that Kerry is going to be given a post in a Biden administration. So though it's unlikely to be a diplomatic one, the high likelihood is he'll be back.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Merkers, thank you very much. Guys, like this video, click on the subscribe button down below, hit that like, share this video. Please go to the Duran shop, pick up some merchandise as well. That really helps out a lot. And of course, PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. Please donate to us on those channels, on those networks. And also go to our channel on BitChute, on ODYSEE, and on Rumble as well. It looks like Rumble is picking up a lot of pace now, as has Parler. We are on Parler. We've been on Parler for a while. The exodus from Twitter continues. Twitter is collapsing. Fox News is collapsing. And you can find us on Parler. You'll be finding us on Rumble, BitChute, and ODYSEE as well.
Indeed you will. And remember also to come to our shop, buy the amazing products we have here there. We have our wonderful magic mugs, the best magic mugs in the world. It's a cold day in London, so I've been drinking warm Yorkshire tea from my best amazing Duran mug with the flag of Great Britain. It's the best tea for, you know, a cold winter day in London. But you can drink coffee or hot chocolate or beer or champagne or whatever you like from them. They are wonderful mugs, the best mugs anywhere ever. And, you know, they come in all kinds of sizes, smaller one with the flag of Greece. And you can find lots of mugs with lots of flags, flag of your country. And if you're American, the flag of your state. We're starting now to do mugs with the flags of states. And you can also buy our wonderful shirts, like the amazing long sleeve t-shirt I'm wearing, many of them embroidered, many of them also with flags. And you will also find wonderful polo shirts and wonderful hats and stickers and hoodies and amazing things. And you can come to our shop and support the Duran, and you can find us, as Alex said, on Parler and BitChute and Rumble. And also, please remember to support us by coming to Patreon and Subscribe Star and those other places. We need all your help to keep ourselves going. And at the same time, we will provide you with all the best programs and all the best merchandise. So come and support us, and also come to our next broadcast.
All right, everybody, take care.